Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Word Against the World podcast. I am your host, Liam Povey. Well, it seems I have camera situation a bit better sorted out, except for junk over here. YouTube people will know what I'm talking about. Spotify people have no clue, because it's just the audio there, obviously. But there's some, this is my junk, so say hello to my junk here. But besides that, so camera situation I think is a little bit better now. You're not like looking at my cup sitting here at the side. It's not all weird. It might be a little shaky. I'm gonna be careful with that. I'm gonna be very, very cautious because it's sitting up like on my computer. I don't have a camera on my actual computer. I'm hoping the new one will, so that's gonna make recording a lot easier here in the future. So quality things should be getting better. Now, another thing I want to talk about really quick before I hop into today's episode is just a couple housekeeping things that are not really like a thing to do one whole episode on. It doesn't really make sense. So the intro music is and the transition music is going to change. I was originally doing that. It's called Canto 34. It's an instrumental track by Five Finger Death Punch. And I think it's pretty cool, and not everyone's a metalhead, but I am changing it to another metal-ish track. It's not going to be as heavy. It's a song called Sorrow Light the Way by Demon Hunter. They're a really cool Christian hard rock band. I really like their music. But I have a couple other ones, they're kind of like hard rock-ish songs, not like super screamy death metal, but I have a couple other like beats I really like for transition music. So let me know, anyone who's listening to this, in the comments, let me know if you guys would like me to do a poll, and I can do that instead. I'll just do a poll like on YouTube and on Spotify, and you guys can vote there. Just a quick poll or a questionnaire. Not like do it in the episode. It's kind of weird for me, and it's a struggle for me to go through and count them all. So doing that poll there would make everything a lot easier. So I will do that for sure. And then, excuse me. Then I also want to talk about Saint Kaizen really quick because I've had a couple people ask me about my hat. Let me get a sip of water a second. I've had a couple people ask me about my hat. So if you're watching the video version, you're seeing my hat right now. I will take it off and like show the camera. This is the Crown of Thorns cap from Saint Kaizen. I thought about applying for the being ambassador for these guys, but I don't do enough lifting, Christ-based workout videos on my Instagram. I don't have enough followers for my Instagram. I don't even have a TikTok anymore to apply for it. I just don't see why I would be considered. If Saint Kaizen's watching this, I would love to become an ambassador, by the way. But I thought about doing that. I don't the process. It's a long thing. It's another thing to stretch myself out. Stretch myself very thin on. It's just like goodness. It's a lot. So but I do want to still support the business. I really like their products. So this is the Crown of Thorns cap. Like I said, I really like it. And on the back, there is the Bible verse, is John 4:18. It says, "There is no fear in love." Really nice cap. And I've got a couple pairs of shorts from them so far as well. So if you're looking for some Christ-based apparel for your workouts or just day to day, I mean, you can wear it day to day. It's meant for performance. It's meant for working out. I bought them for my sports and whatnot. I really like them. I'm actually wearing the crucifixion shorts right now. I guess I can get up and show you. These are the crucifixion shorts, and they have the crucifixion on one side, and then on the other, they have a Bible verse. It is John 3:16. It's kind of hard to see because I don't want to touch the camera. So, but they're really, really nice. Good stuff. So go check them out. SaintKaizen.com. They make a lot of really good products. The other pair I have is the Archangel Michael Performance Shorts. Those ones fit me better because I bought them in a smaller size. Those were XLs. These were a little bit bigger because I didn't know exactly what my size was going to be at the time. My waist is for my jeans is a 38, and these said 38 for that larger size. So I ordered that, and I was incorrect. I just haven't bothered to send it back yet. So I just don't care enough to. So, but they fit nice. These ones still fit nice, but the other ones I have, the Archangel Michael shorts, are my absolute favorite. They have on the right side, on the right inner leg, is Archangel Michael. It's got a black background with the white picture of Archangel Michael casting out the devil, and on the other side, in white text, it says Isaiah 54:17, and it says, how does it go? No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and any tongue that comes against you in, I think the word's enmity, you shall cast out, or shall be cast out. It's a really powerful verse, and they just they make a lot of good apparel, so they're really good, and I highly recommend you guys check them out. So with all that out of the way, let's get into episode 3, Science versus Scripture. I'm going to start by talking about archaeology. So, to begin the section on archaeology, these are taken directly from my book. So, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here and things I will rant and rave on are things I've already written in my book. This is already stuff I've looked over, and I kind of gave myself a little summary. That's another reason I did the thing with the camera for the YouTube people who are watching on YouTube. I put my camera up so now I can look down at my computer screen and then look up. So it just makes everything easier. I love this. I don't know why I haven't been doing this sooner. But like I said, hopefully with my new computer that I'm going to get soon, here in a couple weeks, I will be able to do a lot better recording, and I'll actually have better camera quality. I know I'm going on a rant right now without even talking about what I'm supposed to talk about, but who cares if I go off script? If anyone knows anything about computers, it's a Lenovo LLQ. Is what I'm looking at. It's really nice. It's about like $800, and it's got a really nice camera on it. It's got an NVIDIA RTX 4070 in it and an Intel i7. So it's gonna be really good, especially for college once I get to college. So it's gonna work really well. But now that I got myself off track, let's get back on track and let's talk about this stuff that I've already looked at. This is archaeology stuff. So I wanted to start this with a quote as well. I wrote this down. This is also from my book. This is how I begin. This is how I started chapter 5, all about science versus scripture. I actually made a mistake. Whether it was the first or second episode where I said that I couldn't remember what chapter it was where I was talking about my basic principles. That's chapter 7. So correction has been made. So this chapter 5, is all about science versus scripture. So there's a bunch of discoveries throughout history that have proven the Bible true. Like there's a lot of different discoveries in history that you can't find one that contradicts the Bible, is what I'm saying. There's a bunch of different things out there that prove the Bible true. None of them disprove it. So people are going to make the argument that science disproves the Bible, and that's going to be the second section. But let's start with archaeology. So I have a couple things written down here. First off, starting strong with the Rosetta Stone. So the Rosetta Stone, for those who don't know, was a stone discovered when we were venturing into Egypt and discovering these new ruins. Like, oh, who built these ruins? Oh my God, the pyramids and all this. Oh, aliens built the pyramid. That's where that comes from today. And so the Rosetta Stone was like the first major discovery there. So this Rosetta Stone is, and that's become like a synonymous term with like a what's the term I'm thinking of? Like a breakthrough, like a big breakthrough. Like, oh, like this is the Rosetta Stone of my discovery. So the Rosetta Stone enabled us to read Egyptian hieroglyphs and to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs. And the biggest reason why this is so impactful to the Bible is there's a huge chunk of the Bible's history with the exile and the roaming through the desert for 40 years and the enslavement of the Israelites. A lot of that history takes place in Egypt. And so this enabled us to compare records from the Bible to records from Egypt, and they're exact. They're exact parallels. So that was a huge, huge discovery for us. Just a major, major thing. So, second, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were these scrolls they found in a cave near this place called Qumran in Israel. And they're found to be almost exact to any Hebrew Bibles produced still 1,000 years later. So these Dead Sea Scrolls, like a lot of people know about them, they're very, very famous. They're found in this cave, right, near Qumran, and it's every single book of the Old Testament except for the book of Esther. And they're dated to be roughly made between 200 BC to almost 70 AD. So, for those who don't know, AD means after death, or at least most people assume it does. It's easier to say that because that's not I just smacked the mic. It's not Latin. Initially, I can't speak. I'm stuttering. Initially, what AD means, it means Anno Domino, which means in the year of our Lord. So basically, AD begins as soon as Christ is born. It's not after Christ dies. So there's no 33-year gap because Christ lived for about 33 years. So there's no 33-year gap there between BC and AD. It's as soon as Christ is born is when the new year is, when our new life begins. And that's why we're at 2026, because it's been 2026 years since Christ was born, because we are in the year of our Lord. So between 200 BC, meaning 200 years before the birth of Christ, and 70 years after the birth of Christ, between these eras, and I will reference BC and AD a lot throughout this podcast, between those years, these scrolls were made. It's every single book of the Old Testament except for Esther. The reason why Esther isn't there, we don't know. I didn't see anything that would point to why. And because of these very, very, very close similarities, it proves that the scripture we read today in the Old Testament is a near exact replica of what the Jewish people were reading 2,000 years ago, before Christ came. So it's such strong evidence and strong proof. Another thing I want to put out here is, like, when I say almost exact or near exact, because you can't say exact because, it's not written in Hebrew. You can't say, oh, it's exactly the same. So you can't say that because, it's not written in Hebrew. It's not the exact wording. And I'm going to reference that. I believe it's this episode. So I went through and I've been planning a couple things throughout the day. No, I think it's for a different episode, but you'll see that reference. I'm not going to spoil nothing yet. But, some of these words, like like there's a word in Scottish Gaelic. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I think it's like hyath. It's like a word that means, like, a very strange longing, like you feel like there's like a hole in your chest, basically. There's no real word in English to describe that, though. So it's kind of, the same thing with Hebrew. Is a lot of those words are differences and similarities. So as you translate to ultimately Latin, Vulgate, and then it goes to, Old English, French, whatever, because there's Bibles in different languages. So like the NIV, the New International Version, that's been approved for all nations and whatnot, and they translate it into different languages so other people can read it. It's not all in English. So the big thing with that is, like, there's a couple differences in, like, words and the way they're phrased here or there. But besides that, the entire meaning from the scrolls up until Bible today has stayed completely intact. So, with that being said, since I've been on the topic of the history, so let's go to the Teldon inscription. So the Teldon inscription is an inscription found near, obviously, Teldon, and it states 6 letters. I'm going to make this easier for you guys to understand. 6 letters, BYTDWD. And what it means is House of David. This is ancient Hebrew for meaning House of David. So, like, when I say Hebrew, like the word Yahweh, like if you ever hear someone refer to God as Yahweh, that is the Hebrew name for God. And in Hebrew, it's spelled YHWH. But in English, or at least the way we know it now, we would spell it YAHWEH. So this DWD means House of David is the translation. And this was later on dated to be the 9th century BC, so 900 years before the coming of Christ. And this gives a very good concrete evidence to the reality of the King David in the Bible, and this reaffirms the Bible's truth. A lot of people will say, oh, King David's just this fantasy character created by, the Bible. What if he wasn't real? And then here comes archaeologists. They discover this Teldon inscription. He's real. And it proves that. And then additionally to the Teldon inscription, we have the Moabite stone. This is another really big part of this. So additionally to it is found this thing called the Moabite stone, or the Mesha stele is another name for your stele. The Mesha stele. It's not actually made of steel. A stele, Stele. A stele is a sort of like erected stone monument that is written on. Like this was very common in ancient Samaria and the Assyrian Empire, the Akkadian Empire, and a lot of ancient Babylon. So they did a lot of these steles where they would keep their records, like the Code of Hammurabi, the eye for an eye, Code of Hammurabi. That is found on what's called a stele. So the Mesha stele is is an original tablet that was broken and sold off by the people who found it, but an inscription copy remains in the Louvre Museum over in France. And it starts with the saying, I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab. So Chemosh is like the god of the Moabites, and that's the god they believe in. And so Mesha was a real king, and this is stated in 2 Kings 3, and it tells the exact same story of Mesha's rebellion against original Israeli dominance. So that right there just gives more concrete evidence to the history of the Bible. Then there's the Ketef Hinnom scrolls as well. These are the oldest fragments of biblical text, and they were found in Ketef Hinnom, obviously, near Jerusalem. The first word deciphered of this was, back to the Hebrew stuff, YHWH, Yahweh. That was the first word ever deciphered out of this. And these from my understanding, I didn't write it down, but from my understanding, they were like silver scrolls like printed on silver. I could be wrong on that. I do know they were found in like silver amulets, and it took forever to roll these things out because they're so fragile, and they predate the Babylonian exile by over a century. So they predate Exodus by over a century. And this priest in what's contained on the Ketef Hinnom scrolls is a priestly benediction of number 6. So, it's this another fragment to add to the reality in the story. This is the oldest piece of biblical evidence we have that still exists to this day. Get that hair off my mic. Next, we have the Lachish letters. And this is one that really intrigued me. It would really, I was really interested in this. So in Jeremiah 34:7, it mentions 2 cities, and these 2 cities during this conflict are the only ones that remain fortified during this conflict. And the cities are Lachish and Azekah. So there's these ink-written pottery pieces, or also known as ostraka. So these ostraka shards were found as notes, and they prove what the Bible says in Jeremiah 34:7. And on the letters is written, and I have it written here, let my Lord know that we are watching for the signals of Lachish, according to all the indications which my Lord hath given, for we cannot see Azekah. So there's obviously an army out here in the middle somewhere between Lachish and Azekah, and they can see Azekah, and they're looking for signals from Azekah, from Lachish, because they can't see Azekah. I got them mixed up, my bad. So that's just another huge piece of it, and it really intrigued me because it shows that the practice of ostracism wasn't just confined to the Greeks. So if you don't know what ostraka or ostracism is, a little more brief history for you. Ostraka are, just like I said, they're pieces of pottery. They're pottery shards, broken pottery shards, and you can write notes on them with ink, pottery, and they were used to write names on, especially in Greek times. And what would happen is you would get someone who was put up for exile, and then people would vote. and they would use these pieces of ostraca to vote, and they would write the person's name on there if they wanted to exile them. And it was almost kind of like a Survivor thing. If you ever watched Survivor, it's almost kind of worked like that. Stop shaking the camera. My bad. Okay, and then the next one, second to last, I want to discuss is I actually, you know what, I'm gonna save that one for last. I want to just briefly talk about the Ugaritic texts. This is another really big part of history. It lists off a lot of the Canaanite practices. So if you don't know who the Canaanites were, these are the people in the Bible who worshipped Baal. So when who was it? Who was it that went to like prove against the worship of Baal? Anyway, the king who was, I think it was Ahab, the man who was worshiping Baal, he created an altar and asked Baal to light it on fire. And Baal did not light it on fire because Baal is a false god. Baal is actually found to be a demon, and he did not light it on fire. And then the other man, the Christian man, or I guess early Christian, Jewish man. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. It's gonna come to me here in a minute, and I'm gonna be so mad that I can't think of it now. But anyway, it might be Abraham. I don't remember if it's Abraham or it might be Abraham. I don't know. But he created an altar for God to light on fire, and God did light it on fire. So these Ugaritic texts list off a lot of the Canaanite practices that they used to worship Baal at the time, and they are exact to what the original biblical law at that time was denouncing. Like the biblical law says, don't do this, but that's exactly what they were doing to worship Baal, and it lines up. It's perfect. So that's another piece of evidence. And then the one I wanted to say for last, this one's really, really cool, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Epic of Gilgamesh, for those who don't know, and this is super cool, is this, it's one of the earliest poetic tales in all of civilization. And I get super, super excited about talking about this because it's super cool. So it is one of the, like I said, it's one of the earliest poetic tales in all of civilization. So it's called an epic. So like if you know like the Epic of the Iliad, or like the Odyssey by Homer is an epic. Those are written in a sort of poetic format. So this is one of the first epics ever known to be in human history, and it talks about this king of Assyria, and his name was Gilgamesh. So Gilgamesh is a very proud man, and the gods send down this what's his name, Enkidu to challenge him because he was very tyrannical. And long story short, he goes to meet this man named Utnapishtim. I will say that again slowly so you know what I said. The man's name was Utnapishtim. Yes, very strange. So Utnapishtim was a man who is known to be this hero of the Great Flood. That's the point I want to make. Great Flood. Hold on to that thought. And it relates an episode, and this man, Utnapishtim, relates an episode about the Great Flood to him. So there's like 14 or 15 different stone tablets that the whole Epic of Gilgamesh is found on, and there's an entire tablet dedicated to the story of the Great Flood. So this is one of the many world religious texts, whether it be ancient or modern, that actually acknowledges the Great Flood. Or also known as the Great Deluge. Many world religions talk about some sort of great flood or some sort of great event that caused the great dying. So Utnapishtim, this man, let's talk about Utnapishtim a second. He is warned by their great god, Ea, to construct a boat to survive the flood. Now, who does that sound like? Sounds like Noah, doesn't it? It's an exact parallel to Noah. It's the exact same thing. So, excuse me. So, Utnapishtim, this story of this man, Utnapishtim, is an almost exact parallel to Noah. He is a man commanded by their great God to go construct a boat to survive the flood and carry on the human race. And it says in the Bible that Noah lives for a very, very long time. The men of that time, especially pre-flood, especially pre-deluge, the men of that time lived for very, very long. Like one of the youngest in the lineage of the first 10 names from Adam down to Noah, one of the youngest is Enoch, and he only lived 365 years. I think the longest was like a 900 something. I believe that was, I want to say it's the one that starts with an L. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's the one that starts with an L. But yeah, like he lived for a long time, and these people back then just lived forever. It seemed like they had a very long lifespan, and as we've gone throughout history, you see we don't live as long. So yeah, a lot of these discoveries just make for a lot of evidence for the Bible, and that's all the archaeological stuff I have. But in this next section, I want to rant a little bit more on the science behind everything. So without further ado, let's head over there. So the science part of this as well. There is a huge component within science that teaches us so much to know. That gives a really good proof for God, and it's not a thing of where I'm taking, universe is 6,000 years old. It's actually the first point I'm going to discuss. Not saying the universe is 6,000 years old. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying science proves that. What I'm saying is there's a lot of things in science that directly correlate to the Bible. So I discussed one of these in the very first episode. I talked about how the universe is I said 14.8. I have to correct myself again. Do this for the second time this episode. Wow. Embarrassing. So it's 13.8 billion years old is our estimated age of the universe. If you take that and you divide that by the 6 days of creation, you get to about 2.3 billion years per day, or era, or stage, whatever word you want to use to fill that gap. Times it by 2 days to make the Earth, you get 4.6, which is the estimated age of the Earth. So along with that, there is something in science called the Kalam argument. So the Kalam argument it's very simple to understand. It basically says whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. It's a very, very simple thing to understand, and it makes a lot of practical sense. So a lot of Christian skepticism, like it was discussed like it was discussed last episode, a lot of Christian skepticism is based on just what you can determine from practical thought. So it's very practical proof for the Big Bang, for like the Doppler effect, for example. So with the Doppler effect, and actually this is a really good idea. I should put like a little chart like right here where my hand is, and Spotify people have no idea what I'm talking about. It's awesome. Anyway, for YouTube people, I'll try to remember to put a chart right here, and if I don't, I'm sorry. But there's this thing called the Doppler effect in science, and this was observed by Edwin Hubble, and Hubble has a law for the universe expansion, and he found this thing called redshift versus blue shift. So as light goes, like let's say for example from me and my face to the camera, and it also works with sound waves too, and I'll give a demonstration for that here in a second. So like from me to the camera, if I move back, you're gonna listen to my chair creak, see how it gets darker. Then if I move closer, you can see my face better, and it's not so much because it has to do with the light of my computer. And this seems like something really obvious, like, oh, Liam, you're just saying something that sounds like so stupidly simple. Well, it's a basis for this idea of the Doppler effect. So if I move like that, and let's say my computer screen is the sun, and my face is the earth. So as things move away in space, or even better example, let's say my face is another star. So as things move away from each other in space, the experience was called redshift. So, excuse me, redshift is this, it's the stretching of light waves, or what's called electromagnetic waves. So on the EM spectrum, you have 7 sections, and then you have 13 sections. And what this means is that the smallest EM waves are super, super tiny, just fraction of a millimeter. They the shortest waves are like your gamma rays, and then it comes down. They open up a little bit, they become X-rays, and they open up a little bit more, and they become what's called ultraviolet. So ultraviolet is just small enough to not be visible by human eye. So in between after ultraviolet is we have the 7 areas of visible light. So these are the 7 colors we can see. Now, if anyone here has ever been to kindergarten, you remember Roy G. Biv? That's an actual application in with the Doppler effect and the EM spectrum. So within the entire electromagnetic spectrum, you have gamma, then you have X-ray, and then you have ultraviolet, then you have visible light. And that's why Roy G. Biv ends with Biv, V for violet, and then what? Indigo, and then blue, and it keeps going. So you have your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So your violet is at the end of the EM spectrum, and once it gets just small enough so you can't see it, it becomes ultraviolet. Now, the same is also true on the other end of that. So as it gets bigger, once it becomes slightly bigger than red, and you can't see it, it becomes infrared, lesser red. So we have infrared, and then we have radio waves, and then we have then we have microwaves, then we have radio waves. So you have this spectrum, this broad spectrum. And now when you look up in the sky at night, you can see the stars, you can see other objects up in space. So what this thing that Hubble discovered, this red shift and this blue shift, is he found that everything in the universe, or nearly everything, 99.9%, when observed, has a red shift rather than a blue shift. And what this means is that as the object moves away, the light it gives off begins to stretch because it's moving away, therefore shifting to the red side of the spectrum and ultimately infrared rather than ultraviolet. So it becomes infrared light, and as it stretches and it goes beyond, it's showing that it is moving away from us and not towards us. So if everything's moving away from us, that means the universe is what? Expanding. So the universe is expanding. Okay. Now, if you rewind that, if you go in reverse time, what does that mean? Everything's shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. And if you keep going, eventually you're going to get to a point where the universe is a tiny little clump of matter, where it's all the matter in the universe. It's infinite matter, infinite density, infinite light, infinite energy. And this aligns with the biblical statement that God separated light from darkness on the first day. Boom, bang, bang comes in. Big bang is light. Everything outside is darkness. He separates that. So that's a huge, huge piece of biblical evidence there for the Big Bang. And that's why I feel like it aligns so much with the Bible. It's just a very true statement. So at the same time, you have this, you have this thing where the cosmological constants. So I say that, as I say cosmological constants, I'm not talking about the actual cosmological constant. I mean, within our entire space-time continuum, you have about 30 or so constants, physical constants, that are fine-tuned or seemingly fine-tuned to be set in place for a certain reason. Like the strength of gravity has a set value. The strength of inertia, the force of inertia has a set value. Certain temperatures have a set value. Like water is the universal solvent. It can do anything. So, and you ask yourself, why is that? So, like the forces of magnetism as well, the forces of electromagnetism are just fine-tuned enough to where they need to be. So the big question here is these constants are basically on like a knife edge. And if they tilt even a fraction of a millimeter to one side or the other, the whole universe falls apart, even one of them. So that means there's these tiny little knobs that were turned to fine tune the universe. Who could have done that other than a higher power? So the beauty in nature and in his image. So we are made in God's image, and this is where I want to bring in the whole thing of the fine tuning. Is our DNA? Excuse me, I'm yawning. And I'm trying to get stuff done, trying to record, and just Just a little tired. Just a little tired. Might go drink me a white monster here in a minute. But the big thing I want to put out here is that, we have the capability as humans for rational thought. As I've discussed before in last episode, our rational thought and our capacity for it is our God-given gift as soon as humanity was born. So we are made in God's image. That means God has rational thought. That means it's, again, rational to assume that God did create the Big Bang and fine-tune everything because it would take a rational mind to do that. The universe is very structured. It's very organized. There's very structured laws of physics. There's law codes as to how everything in the universe operates. So, with that being said, that points to the evidence for a creator with a rational mind. And if we have rational minds, we are made in his image, that just reinforces that. And on top of that, organic chemistry to this day still has no way to truly explain how we got such information rich molecules like DNA. So our DNA just has so much information in it. It's nuts. And they can't explain it. They can't explain how it came into being. And the only way, I personally think, the only way to explain something like that is divine intervention. God created this to allow us to have life. God created life. I've never seen life come from non-life. I've been told that if you shine light on a clump of atoms long enough, light will form. And to me, because I've heard that from several top scientists, I shouldn't say that. Don't spread false information. Let me rephrase that. I have heard the phrase used several times in reading articles and watching videos on this stuff. So the idea that if you shine this light long enough on a clump of atoms, life will form. It is possible, but you got to remember, who created light and darkness in the beginning? God. And it says that there will be no need for a sun when we go to heaven because God will be the light. So if God is this light that is shining down on things, and mind you, we have the sun on the earth bringing light to the earth. If we have God who is synonymous with this idea of light, that just makes sense. That, shining light on these atoms creates life. So God creates life. So life comes from life. Life never comes from non-life. So also, the Bible begins with a God who speaks things into being. So like God said, let there be light. God said, let there be darkness. God spoke into being the division between the air and the sea and all this. So something I want to bring up, and this is a little bit, excuse me, this is a little bit of a touchy thing for some people because they're like, oh, that's just a myth, whatever. The Higgs boson. So the Higgs boson was initially called the God particle, and the scientist who created it actually wanted to call it the God blank particle. You can fill in the blank. He wanted to call it that, and the publisher did not want to offend Christians, so he took that out and he just called it the God particle. So the reason why it kind of makes sense is because the Higgs boson, if you don't know anything about bosons, which, I guess I'm just teaching everything today. So bosons are subatomic particles in our universe that kind of deal with the forces of nature. They're force carriers, basically. So there's only one we have yet to discover yet. It's the graviton, and we're still searching for it. And it is the particle that carries the gravitational force. We have discovered the others. There's two particles that govern the weak nuclear force, and it's the W and Z bosons. There's two variants of the Z boson, and they are the positive and negative, and the W is a neutral boson. Then you have the photon, which is like the particle of light. That is the electromagnetic force. That's EM spectrum stuff. And then you have the strong force, which is carried by the gluon. So the gluon, hence the name, holds particles together. That's the strong force. So the only one we have yet to discover out of the four fundamental forces is the graviton that carries the gravitational force. It's a theoretical particle. Now, when we are looking for it, we discovered what's called the Higgs boson. So the Higgs boson, named after the scientist, this Higgs guy, and the Higgs field, is found to be the particle that gives other particles their mass. So this is kind of like the particle that determines everything for the other particles, and that's why it's kind of unique to call it the God particle, because it's the only one out of every other particle to behave like a sound wave. Now, in quantum physics, we know, with basic quantum physics, we know that particles can behave like waves, and waves can behave like particles. Like your electron. So like your electron, your proton, I shouldn't say proton and neutron because those are made of quarks. Like your quarks, your leptons, those are fundamental building blocks of matter as we know it. So those are what are called fermions. So fermions are distinct from bosons. So the fermions are what build matter, and the bosons are what carry the forces. So those are your two classes of particles. Man, I love teaching particle physics. So the Higgs boson is the only one out of all the particles to behave like a sound wave. The rest of them don't behave like a sound wave. The rest of them rely on EM spectrum style behavior. And this is the only one to behave like a sound wave. Now, keep in mind, sound. And what did God do in the beginning? He said, let there be light. Let there be darkness. He spoke these things into being. So that right there just gives a very, very strong correlation to all this. Now, I'm trying to see if there's anything I can think of off the top of my head to add to this, because I mean, like, the last episode was so long and I don't want to cut it short and make you guys feel like I'm cheating you. I'm not. I guess I will say this at the end of the episode, because that's all I have today. I will say this. If there's any other input, like I said before, if anyone has any input, feel free to write something up in the comments. I will look through these. I do read the comments. I will look through these. If you're watching this on YouTube, or even if you somehow you catch it and you're listening to it and you see me like shed a couple tears, don't mind that. That's just how I am. I don't know why I do this. It's just who I am. I do it a lot. Every single time I try to do something like this, it just happens. So never happens when I talk to people in person. I'm usually fine. It doesn't happen all the time, but it will happen every once in a while, where it's like, like why is he crying? It's not like it's emotional. It just happens. It happens. I don't know. So, but yeah, that's a huge thing I wanted to cover, and I wanted to get to that early on. So this is, for episode 3, and I really wanted to cover this, and yeah, hope to see you guys in the next one, and I pray you all have a blessed day.